The Manhattan skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the velvet darkness of night. Inside the penthouse suite of the Mandarin Oriental, Lucas Marshall stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, crystal tumbler in hand, surveying his kingdom. At 32 years old, he had conquered the business world with the same ruthless efficiency that had defined every aspect of his life. Lucas Marshall wasn't just wealthy, he was a force of nature. His hedge fund had outperformed every competitor for 5 consecutive years. His real estate portfolio spanned 3 continents. His name alone could make stock prices rise or fall. And he knew it. He wore his power like a second skin, comfortable and commanding. The party swirled behind him, Manhattan's elite celebrating another of his victories. He'd just closed a deal that would net him $200 million before taxes. Another trophy for his collection. Another proof that Lucas Marshall always won. Admiring your reflection again? Jack Morrison's voice cut through his thoughts. Jack, his oldest friend from their Harvard days, was one of the few people who dared to mock him. One of the even fewer people Lucas tolerated it from. Lucas turned, a slight smile playing at his lips. Just appreciating the view. You should try it sometime from up here instead of the 40th floor. Ouch. Jack laughed, not actually offended. His own fortune was nothing to scoff at, merely in the hundreds of millions rather than billions. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, actually. My superior altitude? Your superiority complex. Jack moved to stand beside him. Both men reflected in the glass against the city lights. You've become predictable, Lucas. Boring even. Lucas's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Many things could be said about him. Ruthless, cold, calculating, but never boring. Careful, Jack. I'm serious. Jack swirled his champagne, studying the bubbles like they held answers. When's the last time you were genuinely challenged? When's the last time you weren't absolutely certain you'd win? Last Tuesday. Negotiating with the Japanese consortium took actual effort. I'm not talking about business. Jack turned to face him fully now, and Lucas recognized that look. It was the same expression Jack had worn before their legendary poker game in their senior year, before the cliff-diving incident in Santorini, before every moment that had defined their friendship. I'm talking about something that truly tests you. Something where the outcome isn't predetermined by your bank account. Lucas's interest sparked despite himself. He was bored, had been for months, though he'd never admit it aloud. When everything came easy, when every challenge could be solved with enough money or leverage, life lost its flavor. What did you have in mind? Jack's smile widened, predatory and knowing. A bet. A real one. Not stocks or properties or business deals. Something personal. How personal? Marriage. Lucas nearly choked on his whiskey. You've lost your mind. Have I? Think about it, Lucas. You date models, actresses, socialites, all beautiful, all perfectly amenable to your lifestyle, all completely interchangeable. You know exactly how those relationships will go because you've had the same one 50 times. Where's the challenge in that? Marriage isn't a challenge, Jack. It's a legal contract that serves no purpose for someone like me. Then you won't mind the bet. Jack's eyes gleamed with mischief and something else, something calculating that Lucas couldn't quite read. $1 million. Plus that waterfront property in the Hamptons you've been trying to buy from me for 3 years. Now Lucas was truly interested. That property was the last piece he needed to complete his coastal portfolio. Jack knew it too, had been dangling it like bait for years. And the terms? You marry someone completely outside your usual type. Someone who doesn't fit the supermodel aesthetic. Someone who won't be impressed by your money or your power. Someone real. Jack paused for effect. And you stay married for 6 months. Full 6 months, living together, playing the part. That's it? That's your big challenge? Lucas laughed, but his competitive instinct was already calculating angles. Any woman would agree to that. 6 months playing dress-up in exchange for the settlement afterward. There's more. Jack held up a finger. You can't lie about who you are or manipulate her into it. She has to agree with full knowledge of the bet, the timeline, everything. Complete transparency. You're removing all my tools. Exactly. And here's the real kicker. If you fall for her, if she changes you in any meaningful way, then I win. Even if you technically make it the full 6 months. Lucas's laugh was genuine now. The idea that someone could change him, could penetrate the armor he'd spent 3 decades perfecting, was absurd. Insulting even. How exactly would you determine if I've changed? I'll know. Jack's smile was mysterious. Trust me, I'll know. So do we have a bet? Every instinct Lucas had honed in the cutthroat world of high finance told him there was an angle here he wasn't seeing. Jack wasn't stupid, he wouldn't propose this unless he thought he could win. But Lucas's ego, his absolute certainty in his own invulnerability, overrode caution. "You're on," Lucas said, extending his hand. "But when I win, and I will win, I want it in writing. The property, the money, everything." Jack's handshake was firm, his smile almost pitying. "I'll have the lawyers draw up the papers. And Lucas? I already have someone in mind. You'll meet her this week." As Jack walked away, Lucas returned his gaze to the city below. A new game, a new challenge. He'd play along, prove once again that Lucas Marshall couldn't be beaten, couldn't be changed, couldn't be anything other than exactly what he'd made himself. He had no idea that the game had already started. And he was already losing. 3 days before Lucas Marshall shook hands on his bet, Chloe Richards stood in the cramped Brooklyn apartment she shared with her mother, staring at a photograph that had haunted her for 5 years. The picture showed a man in his early 50s, graying at the temples but with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Michael Richards, her father. Captured in a moment of joy at her college graduation, before Lucas Marshall entered their lives like a hurricane and destroyed everything. Chloe's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Jack Morrison's name appeared on the cracked screen. She picked it up, her hand steady despite the acceleration of her heartbeat. "He took the bait," Jack's voice confirmed without preamble. Chloe closed her eyes, allowing herself one moment of victory before the real work began. "When?" 3 nights ago. At the party exactly like we planned. He thinks it's his idea, his challenge to overcome. He has no idea you exist yet. And you're certain he won't remember? Chloe. Jack's voice softened with old pain. Lucas Marshall has destroyed dozens of companies, hundreds of lives. Your father's business was just another Tuesday for him. I'd be shocked if he even remembers the name Richards, let alone connects it to you. The bitter truth of that statement settled in Chloe's stomach like lead. To Lucas Marshall, her father's suicide had been a footnote, if he'd even noticed it at all. Just collateral damage in his endless quest for more. "Tell me again," Jack said quietly. "Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Lucas isn't just ruthless in business. He figures out who you are, what you're planning. He won't." Chloe's voice was ice and iron. "Men like Lucas Marshall don't see people. They see assets and obstacles, pawns and players. To him, I'll just be another challenge to overcome, another woman to bend to his will. He won't look deeper because he doesn't believe there's anything deeper to find. And if you're wrong? If he does look." Chloe turned away from her father's photograph and looked at herself in the mirror instead. At 27, she'd survived things that would have broken weaker people. The loss of her father. The loss of her child. The years of poverty and struggle and endless, gnawing rage. That rage had refined her, forged her into something harder than Lucas Marshall could imagine. She'd spent 5 years planning this revenge, researching every detail of his life, understanding him better than he understood himself. She tracked down Jack Morrison, her father's former business partner, and convinced him to help her. Jack, who'd escaped Marshall's destruction by pure luck and lived with the survivor's guilt ever since. "He won't look," Chloe repeated with absolute certainty. "Because I'm going to give him exactly what he expects to see. A woman overwhelmed by his world, struggling to resist his power, slowly succumbing to his wealth and charm. He'll be so busy congratulating himself on his inevitable victory that he won't notice the trap closing around him until it's too late." Jack was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warning. "Chloe, I'm helping you because I owe your father that much and more. Because Lucas Marshall should face consequences for once in his privileged life. But promise me something. Promise me you know the difference between justice and revenge. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this." "I lost myself 5 years ago, Jack. I'm just retrieving what's left." After she hung up, Chloe opened her laptop and pulled up the file she'd been building for years. Lucas Marshall's complete dossier. Business dealings, personal relationships, psychological profile, weaknesses, fears, the carefully hidden insecurities that drove his need to dominate. She knew that he'd grown up poor, that his mother had cleaned houses to put him through school, that he'd clawed his way to Harvard on scholarships and sheer will. She knew that he'd transformed himself from nobody into royalty through ruthless ambition and a willingness to destroy anyone in his path. She understood him. More importantly, she understood his blind spots, the places where his ego made him stupid, where his certainty made him vulnerable. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Let Lucas think he was in control. Let him believe he was manipulating her, winning the bet, proving his superiority. And while he was busy congratulating himself, she would dismantle him piece by piece. Not his money, that would be too simple, too clean. She would dismantle his certainty, his control, his fundamental belief in his own invulnerability. She would make him care, make him vulnerable, make him human. And then, when he was finally capable of feeling something genuine, she would show him exactly what he'd destroyed. She would make Lucas Marshall understand what it felt like to lose everything. "I'm ready," Chloe whispered to her father's photograph. "I'm finally ready." 3 days later she received a text from Jack. "Tomorrow. Lumiere Restaurant. 8 p.m. He thinks he's meeting a stranger. Show him exactly what he expects to see." Chloe spent the next 24 hours preparing. Not with makeup or designer clothes. Those would come later when she needed them. For now, she needed to be forgettable enough that Lucas wouldn't see her as a threat, interesting enough that he'd take the bet. She chose a simple dress, did her hair in a modest style, practiced her expressions in the mirror. Confident but not arrogant. Intelligent but not threatening. Someone Lucas would assume he could read, predict, control. Someone he would drastically underestimate. Lumiere Restaurant existed in that rarefied space where the wealthy went not to eat but to be seen eating. The lighting was deliberately dim, the better to create intimacy and hide imperfections. Each table was positioned for maximum privacy while still allowing diners to subtly observe the room's power players. Chloe arrived early, claiming her table and ordering water. She watched the entrance, timing her breathing, centering herself. 5 years of planning came down to this moment. 5 years of grief and rage and meticulous preparation. She saw him before he saw her. Lucas Marshall moved through the restaurant like royalty among peasants, his custom suit fitting perfectly on an athletic frame maintained by personal trainers and disciplined routine. Women tracked his movement with barely concealed interest. Men straightened slightly as he passed, unconscious acknowledgement of a dominant presence. He was, Chloe admitted with clinical detachment, objectively attractive. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that suggested intelligence and determination. But she'd seen photographs, had studied his face in the articles about her father's company's collapse. She knew what lay beneath the handsome exterior, the cold calculation, the ruthless ambition, the absolute absence of empathy. She knew, and she hated him with a purity that surprised her with its intensity. Lucas reached her table and extended his hand, his smile calculated to charm. "Chloe Richards. Jack's told me intriguing things about you." Chloe shook his hand, matching his grip with unexpected firmness. She saw his eyes flicker with surprise, the first small victory. "I doubt that," she said, her voice level. "Jack knows better than to intrigue you before you've decided whether I'm worth your time." Lucas's smile widened, genuine amusement flickering across his features. "Direct. I appreciate that. May I sit?" "It's your reservation." "Actually, it's Jack's. But I suppose that's semantics." Lucas settled into his chair with the ease of someone comfortable in every environment. "So you know why we're here." Jack explained the situation. "The bet. 6 months of marriage, then we go our separate ways. You get bragging rights and whatever you're actually after, I get a comfortable settlement." Chloe leaned forward slightly. "What I don't understand is why someone like you needs a bet to get married. Surely women throw themselves at you constantly." "They do." There was no false modesty in his statement, just fact. "Which is precisely why this is interesting. Jack seems to think you won't." "Won't what?" "Throw myself at you?" Chloe smiled and she made it mysterious, made it knowing. "You're assuming I'm susceptible to whatever tools you usually use? Money, power, physical attraction. What if I'm not? Everyone's susceptible to something." "True. But what if what I'm susceptible to isn't anything you have?" The silence that followed was charged with something Chloe recognized as Lucas recalibrating his approach. He'd expected, what? Nervousness? Gratitude? Instead, she was meeting him as an equal, which clearly wasn't part of his usual script. "I'm curious," Lucas said, leaning back and studying her with open intensity. "Why did you agree to this meeting? Jack must have explained how unusual this is." Chloe had prepared for this question, had crafted her answer carefully to be true enough to be believable while hiding the deeper truth. "Because I'm curious too. Jack tells me you're a man who believes he can have anything, control anyone, win any game. I wanted to see if that was true. And? I think you're probably very good at getting what you want from people who want something from you. But I don't want anything you have, Mr. Marshall. Which makes me curious about what happens when your usual tools don't work." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, not quite respect but close. Recognition, perhaps, that she was more complicated than he'd anticipated. Everyone wants something, he repeated. Do they? Chloe took a deliberate sip of her water, letting the silence stretch. Or have you just been surrounded by people who wanted your money for so long that you've forgotten some people have different currencies? And what's yours? Freedom. The word came out harder than she'd intended, carrying echoes of truth she hadn't meant to reveal. She softened it quickly. 6 months seems like a long time to you, doesn't it? But a lot can happen in 6 months. People can change. Secrets can surface. The hunter can become the hunted. Lucas's expression shifted, something sharper entering his gaze. You speak like you're the one setting terms. Aren't I? You need someone who won't be impressed by you, who won't bend easily, who'll make this challenging enough to be interesting. Otherwise it's not really a bet, it's just 6 months of going through motions. Where's the victory in that? She watched him process this, watched his competitive instinct war with his caution. Lucas Marshall had built his empire on reading people, on finding and exploiting weaknesses. But Chloe had spent 5 years studying him, understanding exactly what buttons to push. Dinner, Lucas finally said, decision made. Tomorrow. A real one, not this preliminary chess match. We'll discuss actual terms, contracts, arrangements, expectations. And we'll see if we're actually compatible enough to pull this off. Why not discuss it now? Because, Lucas's smile turned predatory, I want to research you first. Due diligence. Surely you understand. Chloe felt a flutter of concern, if he dug too deep, if he connected her to Michael Richards, but she pushed it down. Jack had helped her build a paper trail that would withstand surface-level investigation. And Lucas's ego would make him sloppy. He wouldn't believe she could be a threat. Research away, Chloe said, gathering her purse to leave. You won't find anything interesting. I'm exactly what I appear to be, someone who isn't impressed by your world and isn't afraid of you. She stood, and Lucas stood with her, ingrained manners from whatever working-class background he'd escaped. Up close he was taller than she'd expected, more physically imposing. But Chloe had faced worse than physical intimidation. She'd faced the loss of everything. I'll send you the details for tomorrow, Lucas said, and there was something in his voice now, something that suggested she'd successfully intrigued him. Chloe Richards. Jack was right, you are interesting. Just interesting enough to take the bet, I hope. Oh, I'm taking the bet. The question is whether you're brave enough to follow through when you realize what you're really agreeing to. Chloe smiled, and this time she let him see steel beneath it. Try me. She left him standing there, could feel his eyes on her back as she exited the restaurant. Once outside, she allowed herself 3 deep breaths, centering herself, confirming that her hands were steady. Phase 1 complete. Lucas Marshall was intrigued, challenged, already thinking about how to win. He had no idea the game had rules he didn't know, that the board had been set long before he sat down to play. Jack called as she walked to the subway. How did it go? Perfectly. He's hooked. Chloe, I just want to say one more time. I know, Jack. You've warned me. But this has been 5 years in the making. I'm not turning back now. Just, remember he's not a cartoon villain. He's a person. Complicated, damaged in his own way. If you make this too personal, if you can't maintain the distance. I watched my father hang himself, Jack. I lost my baby from the stress of what Marshall did to us. There is no distance too far to fall. This is already as personal as it gets. After she hung up, Chloe descended into the subway, joining the press of normal people living normal lives, untouched by the rarefied world of Lucas Marshall and his games. She was one of them, she reminded herself. Despite everything, despite what she was about to do, she was still one of them. Lucas Marshall had forgotten that people like her existed. That they could fight back. She was going to remind him. Their second meeting took place at a cafe in Brooklyn, Chloe's choice, and deliberately chosen to pull Lucas out of his comfort zone. The cafe was the kind of place where struggling artists nurse single cups of coffee for hours, where the furniture was mismatched and the art on the walls was for sale and actually affordable. Chloe watched through the window as Lucas's black Mercedes pulled up outside, incongruous among the battered sedans and economy cars. She watched him assess the neighborhood, saw the moment of calculation as he decided whether to have his driver wait or dismiss him. He dismissed him. Interesting, Lucas wanted privacy for this conversation, or at least the appearance of normalcy. He walked into the cafe, his $3,000 suit drawing every eye in the room, and Chloe watched him scan for her with the efficiency of someone used to evaluating rooms for threats and opportunities. Their eyes met. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just held his gaze and let him come to her. This is quaint, Lucas said as he sat down, his tone making clear that quaint wasn't a compliment. This is reality, Chloe corrected. Most people don't live in penthouses or dine at restaurants where the wine costs more than monthly rent. If we're going to do this, you should probably experience how the other 99% lives. I know how they live. I was one of them. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Jack had briefed her on Lucas's background, but she feigned ignorance. Were you? You don't seem like someone who remembers being poor. Something sharp flickered across Lucas's face, quickly suppressed. I remember. I just chose not to stay there. By climbing over anyone in your way? By working harder and smarter than anyone else. Lucas signaled to the barista, ordered an espresso black. At least he wasn't precious about coffee. But we're not here to discuss my biography. You wanted to meet. Here I am. What are your terms? Chloe pulled out a folder. Actual paper, not digital, because she knew it would seem both archaic and serious to someone like Lucas. I had a lawyer draft this. My terms for the 6 months. Lucas took the document and Chloe watched his face as he read. She'd spent 3 days perfecting those terms with Jack's legal help, making them protective enough to seem genuine while actually serving her larger purpose. Separate bedrooms, Lucas read aloud. Complete financial independence. No access to personal communications, whereabouts, or social activities. The right to maintain my current employment and relationships. He looked up. These aren't marriage terms. These are roommate terms. Exactly. You want the appearance of marriage for your bet. I'm providing that. But I'm not selling you control over my life. Most people would see this as an opportunity. I'm not most people, Chloe interrupted. And if that's going to be your refrain every time I don't react how you expect, this is going to be a very long 6 months. Lucas set down the contract, studying her with that intensity she was beginning to recognize. It was the look of a predator encountering unexpected prey, fascinated but wary. What exactly do you get out of this arrangement, Chloe? And don't say freedom. That's an answer, not an explanation. Chloe had prepared for this too, had crafted a lie wrapped in enough truth to be believable. Stability. 6 months of not worrying about rent, about bills, about whether I can afford groceries and still make my mother's medical payments. 6 months to breathe without drowning. And then we part ways. I get enough of a settlement to establish real security, and you get whatever it is you're really after. You think I'm after something beyond winning the bet? Everyone's after something, Chloe threw his own words back at him. You've made a fortune reading between lines and finding hidden angles. So yes, I think there's something more to this bet than just proving you can marry someone outside your type. But that's your business. I'm just negotiating my terms. Lucas smiled, and this time it seemed almost genuine. You know, when Jack proposed this bet, I thought it would be simple. 6 months of going through motions with someone grateful for the opportunity. But you're not grateful, are you? Should I be? You're the one getting something out of this arrangement. Whatever victory you're chasing. I'm just trying to not be exploited in the process. Fair enough. Lucas pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the contract. I'll have my lawyers review this. If it's as straightforward as it appears, I'll have them draft the actual marriage contract incorporating your terms. And the financial settlement? Negotiable. What did you have in mind? Chloe named a figure, substantial enough to seem like her real goal, small enough that Lucas wouldn't blink. She watched him mentally calculate, saw him conclude that she was being reasonable, maybe even understating her worth. Perfect. Done, Lucas said. Assuming you can live with the public aspect of this. I'm not a celebrity, but I'm known in certain circles. There will be events, appearances, photo opportunities. Nothing excessive, but enough to make the marriage appear legitimate. I can handle being arm candy for 6 months. That's not what Lucas stopped, clearly frustrated by her ability to needle him. You're deliberately misinterpreting me. Am I? What would you call a wife whose only purpose is to appear at your side and make you look good? A partner. Someone who understands that certain social obligations come with certain lifestyles. Certain lifestyles I didn't choose and don't want, Chloe said, but she softened it with a slight smile. But fine. I'll play the part. Just don't expect me to pretend I enjoy it. They spent the next hour negotiating details, where they'd live, his penthouse, non-negotiable, how they'd handle finances, separate accounts, his insistence. What story they'd tell people, a whirlwind romance, the only believable option for a marriage this sudden. Through it all, Chloe maintained her persona of someone wary but willing, skeptical but practical. She didn't let him see the anger burning beneath her composure. Didn't let him see how every moment sitting across from him, negotiating with him like this was business rather than revenge, made her want to scream the truth. That 5 years ago, his business dealings had destroyed her father. That her mother still cried at night. That Chloe herself had lost a baby from the stress of sudden poverty and loss. Lucas Marshall had done that. The man sitting across from her, sipping his espresso and negotiating marriage terms like it was another business deal, had destroyed her family without even noticing. So we have an agreement? Lucas asked as they prepared to leave. In principle. Once your lawyers confirm the contract, yes. Lucas stood, and again that ingrained politeness, standing when she did. For what it's worth, Chloe, I respect what you're doing here. Setting boundaries, protecting yourself. It's smart. I've learned not to trust people who have more power than I do, Chloe said, and that was pure truth. They tend to use it. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or memory. Fair enough. I'll be in touch about the wedding date. I'm thinking next month. No point in dragging this out. Agreed. The sooner we start, the sooner it's over. As Chloe watched Lucas walk back to his waiting car, she pulled out her phone and texted Jack. Phase 2 complete. 1 month until the cage door closes. He still has no idea he's the one trapped inside. Jack's response came immediately, be careful. You're playing with fire. Chloe smiled, bitter and cold. Good. Let it burn. The wedding took place on a gray Tuesday morning at City Hall, precisely 32 days after their cafe negotiation. No flowers, no guests, no romance. Just two strangers signing a legal contract that would bind them for 6 months. Chloe wore a simple blue dress she'd owned for years. Lucas wore a suit that probably cost more than her car had. The judge who married them was efficient and bored, having performed the same ceremony 3 times already that morning. The whole thing took 7 minutes. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the judge intoned without enthusiasm. You may kiss the bride. Chloe and Lucas looked at each other. This was the first moment of genuine awkwardness between them. Neither had considered this detail. Lucas raised an eyebrow, a question. Chloe gave the smallest nod. The kiss was brief, formal, meaningless. His lips were warm but impersonal. Chloe felt nothing except a grim satisfaction. She was legally married to the man who'd destroyed her family. The irony was almost beautiful. They signed the papers. The judge handed them a marriage certificate. It was done. Well, Lucas said as they stood on the steps of City Hall, that was romantic. It was a transaction, Chloe corrected. Let's not pretend otherwise. My car is waiting. I assume you'll want to collect your things before moving in? I'll need a few hours. Take the day. I have meetings anyway. Come to the penthouse when you're ready. Lucas handed her a key card. Top floor. Security will have your information. He left without another word, sliding into his Mercedes and disappearing into Manhattan traffic. Chloe stood there for a moment, holding the marriage certificate and key card, letting the reality of what she'd just done settle over her. She was married to Lucas Marshall. She had legal access to his home, his life, his world. The game had truly begun. Chloe took the subway back to Brooklyn, riding the packed train among the afternoon crowds, normal people living normal lives. She was one of them, she reminded herself. Despite the marriage certificate in her purse, despite what she was about to do, she was still one of them. Her mother was waiting when she got home, her face tight with worry and something else. Disapproval, maybe, or fear. You really went through with it, Emma Richards said, her voice hollow. I told you I would. Marrying the man who killed your father. Living with him. Chloe, this isn't justice. This is necessary. Chloe set down her purse and went to the mantel, to her father's photograph. He has to understand, Mom. He has to know what he did. And you think this is the way? Marrying him? What happens when he finds out who you are? He won't. Jack made sure of it. My last name is common enough, my background scrubbed clean of any connection to Dad's company. Lucas Marshall doesn't remember destroying Richard's tech because he's destroyed so many companies that they all blur together. We're invisible to him. Insignificant. You're not insignificant to me, Emma said softly. You're all I have left. And I'm terrified you're going to lose yourself in whatever revenge you're planning. Chloe turned to face her mother, this woman who'd aged 20 years and 5, who'd lost her husband and nearly lost her daughter and still somehow kept breathing. I lost myself 5 years ago, Mom. When I found Dad in the garage. When I lost the baby 2 weeks later. When we lost the house, my college fund, everything. I've been a ghost for 5 years. Maybe this will let me finally be real again. Or maybe it'll destroy what's left of you. They looked at each other across the small apartment, across the chasm of grief that would always exist between them now. Chloe wanted to promise that she'd be careful, that she wouldn't lose herself, that she'd come back. But they both knew those might be lies. Instead, Chloe packed her single suitcase with the few belongings she'd need for 6 months in a world of wealth. She hugged her mother goodbye, promising to call every day. And then she took a cab, splurging on the expense since Lucas was paying for everything now, to an address that represented everything she'd spent 5 years hating. The penthouse building was all glass and steel and silent judgment. The doorman barely glanced at her suitcase before verifying her name and directing her to a private elevator. The elevator itself was larger than her bedroom had been, all mirrors and soft lighting designed to make wealthy people feel even more attractive. The ascent to the 45th floor took less than a minute but felt like crossing into another world. The elevator opened directly into Lucas's penthouse. No hallway, no neighbors, just instant arrival into someone's private domain. Chloe stepped out into a space that could have housed 20 families, all soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the Manhattan skyline into living artwork. Lucas was waiting, drink in hand, master of his domain. "Welcome home," he said, and the irony in his voice was unmistakable. Chloe walked past him to the windows, looking out at the city 45 stories below. From up here, people were invisible. Traffic was a silent light show. The world was reduced to aesthetics and distance. "This is what you see every day," Chloe said quietly. "People as abstractions. Problems as distant specks that don't touch you." "That's what you see," Lucas replied, walking to stand beside her. "I see opportunity. Growth. The future being built in real time. You see whatever lets you sleep at night." Lucas turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something genuine in his expression. Irritation maybe, or the first stirrings of awareness that she wasn't going to be easy. "You know, most people in your position would at least pretend to be grateful. I'm not grateful. I'm here because we have a contract. 6 months, not a day more." Chloe picked up her suitcase and turned to face him. "Which bedroom is mine?" Lucas pointed to a hallway. "Third door on the left. Your own bathroom, walk-in closet. I had some basic clothes added. You'll need appropriate attire for the events I mentioned." "I have clothes." "Not for my world, you don't. Consider it part of the contract. Appearance matters in my circles." Chloe wanted to argue but remembered her role, resistant.